right, welcome back, Consumer Law 101 students and viewers. My name is Aaron Swift. I'm the CEO and managing partner of Swift Law North, and today we are here about basic video number 5, ABCs of Credit Reports, Part 3, Common Terms and Definitions. As always, let's start with the agenda. Today we're going to be talking about common credit reporting terms and definitions. Quick disclaimer, this is of course not an exhaustive list. It's just the most salient ones, the most pertinent ones we think that consumers should know as they kind of begin their journey into learning about the space, really. We're going to talk about common credit reporting terms like trade line, purge date, dispute status, dispute code, original creditor, transferred, sold, and then common overlapping financial terms like delinquency versus default, charge off, repossession, foreclosure, and eviction. This is a little bit longer, so let's get right in. All right. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is a basic video series. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of depth on any one of these things, but the trade line is just an account. It's generally in the credit account section or the collections, and it's either one of your credit accounts or a collections trade line. That's a listing and account of the actual various debts. So if I would say there's a Capital One account on my credit report, I'd say it's a Capital One trade line. Purge date is the date that a negative item has to come off of a credit report. Actually, the purge date is a date any item would come off a credit report, but generally speaking, the Fair Credit Reporting Act has rules and limitations on how long negative or derogatory information can last and when it must fall off, or when it does fall off, that is called the purge date. I always think of the movie The Purge series, but that's the date, usually a good thing, where bad information is going to fall off a credit report. If there's a dispute code or dispute status, that means there's been a dispute in the past, either to the furnisher or to a credit reporting agency, and that's usually going to signify that there was a past dispute in that section. Um, Original versus current creditor, we talked about this a little bit in the past. This overlaps with the FDCPA. See advanced video number 1 for more information. But the creditor is the person who allegedly owns the debt at the time. So it could be the original creditor. That would be you take out a debt with Capital One, you take out a vehicle loan with Santander, or you have a lease application with a landlord. That's the original creditor. There could be a different current creditor, though, especially if a debt has been sold. In most instances, you're going to find that the current creditor would be a junk debt buyer, for example, when a charged off credit card is bought. Late payments are just what they are. In most credit reporting system and models, they're just going to go 360, 90, sometimes all the way up to 180 plus. Some of them stop at 150 or even 120 plus, depending on the credit reporting agency and the type of report. A debt has been transferred or sold, it'll be listed as such on a credit report. That's very important when we talk about some later terms and definitions, especially when we talk about debt defense, credit card debt defense cases. It's very important to be able to follow the timeline of a debt and its history. If it's been transferred or sold multiple times, you should be able to see that basically through a credit report. It sounds kind of simple, but if an account is open versus closed, is a big deal. It matters differently in different scoring models. Sometimes closed accounts, if they're closed by the credit grantor, can have a derogatory connotation. So it is important to understand and to keep in mind if an account's reporting as appropriately open or closed. And lastly, sometimes there's an additional remark or status about the account. It could be paying under partial payment agreement or another whole bunch of status codes that aren't too material here today. All right. Some common overlapping financial terms. So a delinquency versus a default. A delinquency is generally a missed payment. And think of the payment history grid we just talked about with late payments, 30, 60, 90. That's basically the history and the evolution of the delinquency. So you could go delinquent 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120, so on and so forth. Or you could go 30 days, 60 days, make one payment, stay 60 days, make one payment, stay 60 days. So delinquency is just basically a history of the missed payments. A default is a contract term. Basically, when a contract signifies and defines when a default occurs. Sometimes it's by missing one payment is a trigger of a default. Sometimes under credit card agreements, filing of a bankruptcy is an automatic default, which could be an automatic default even if you've never missed a payment. Again, default is a creature of contract, generally speaking, and it's different than a delinquency. Um, Charge off, that's a big one in this space. I just noticed a misspelling. I'm going to fix that in real time. Look at that. Um, I'm not going to go into great detail here, but charge off are one of the more and biggest misunderstood items in this entire industry, whether that's credit reporting or credit repair. Um, charge off is an accounting tool. It has more to do with the IRS and reporting of assets and liabilities than it has anything to do with whether a consumer owes the debt or not. Usually there's an internal charge off or an external charge off. In both cases, you have to, close the account. You can no longer charge contractual interest or contractual fees. Basically, it's kind of the closure of account for collection purposes, and you can no longer report it as an asset. There's an external charge off on certain types of accounts when a debt goes basically 180 days or 6 months or more delinquent. Then there's a trigger for a charge off as an IRS requirement. That way you can no longer report that as an asset or collectible asset. But in both instances, it does not mean that consumer doesn't owe the debt. It doesn't mean that the debt cannot be reported as a charge off. In fact, most courts find that you can report charge off even multiple months in a row as long as that's the continued status of an account. So there's so much more to know about charge offs. I would commend you to look into it, but that's enough for the purpose of this intro course. But just know it does not mean charge off does not mean that balance needs to be zero. Charge off does not mean that it cannot be collected. It's basically an accounting dance, whether that's internal or external. Repossession is when collateral is taken to pay back a debt that the collateral was used to secure. That's a fancy way of saying, like, when you take out a car note, it's secured by the car. And so if you fail to make payments on that note and there's a default, then they'll come repossess the car, and that's the collateral. It can happen with other things too, not just vehicles. You can have a water softener system repossessed. You could have um, well, I guess in a really fancy way, a foreclosure is a way of quote unquote repossessing a house or the collateral that's used to secure a mortgage. Repossession can be voluntary and involuntary. They're both derogatory events, but one is worse than the other, involuntary being worse, of course. Foreclosure is a process by which a mortgage is going to be foreclosed. The interest that the house or the land that's the collateral securing the mortgage note, they're seeking to get that property via foreclosure proceeding. Um, there's different reportings. You can have FC for foreclosure. You can have F for foreclosure. There's also FS reporting, which means foreclosure started. And those all mean a little bit different things, especially in a state like Florida, where you have to file specific documents in court, one called a lis pendens, to start a foreclosure proceeding. So in Florida, if there's an FS reporting, it could mean one thing versus a foreclosure being started in another state. Um, Lastly, eviction is a common issue in this space. You can have an eviction that just seeks possession of a leased apartment. You could also have an eviction that seeks possession plus a money judgment, and then depending on which one is sought, it needs to be reported as such. And we're going to talk about later different types of credit reports, including your rental screening reports. And the type of eviction, if one has happened, is actually a very important piece. So again, these are some common overlapping financial terms that it's really important to know as consumers, at least the basics about, because these are going to be things that you may or may not see on credit reports that could or could not be accurate. And as long as you understand the basics of them, at least now you have a head start. And that kind of leads us into our best practices discussion. So I'm going to say it every time: you're in the best place. We are here to educate consumers, professionals in the space as well. We have coursework designed for everyone. And if that coursework leads to education and that education leads to consumers invoking their rights, we at Swift Law North want to then help litigate. Let's think of what we now have all together. So we understand who the players are in this space, whether that's the credit reporting agencies, furnishers, down to the users and consumers. We know the common sections of the credit report, and now we even know common terms. So when we look into a credit report and see terms like charge off or repossession or foreclosure or eviction or late payment designations, at least now consumers will have an idea of what they're looking at. And therefore, you can be able to at least start understanding what is wrong with these credit reports. Remember, going back to earlier videos, up to half credit reports by some accounts can have material errors, and those material errors can lead to litigation, which can lead to life-changing money. You know, lastly, again, I say this a bunch of different ways. Don't rely on bad advice or offers that people give you of guarantees. These companies on the other side, they're meant to trick you. They want you to pay as much money as possible. Definitely want you to see advanced videos 9 and 10 for secrets of both of these industries so that you can know how to fight back better. But just always go back to these basics, the common terms, definitions. If you know them, you're going to know how to fight back, and that's what we're here to do. All right. Lastly, if you have any more questions, if you want to learn more, go to consumerlaw101.com. And if you think you might have a case, if you're being harassed by debt collectors, if there are grave errors on your credit reports, reach out to us at www.swiftlawnorth.com. Thanks.